Welcome to the Four Visions Market podcast, a space built on the principles of integrity and reciprocity. Together, we will engage in thought-provoking conversations about plant medicines, why these plants are coming out of the rainforest, jungles, and mountains after thousands of years, and what it means to be in right relationship with the ancestral wisdom cultures and guardians of these traditions. I'm your host, Mariah, founder and director of Four Visions Market. This podcast is the natural evolution in our commitment to providing you, our tribe, with incredible resources to support you on your healing journey through plant medicines. Welcome home. Welcome back, Four Visions Tribe. This week, I am thrilled to bring you a very special episode with a dear medicine brother of mine. Rick William is a purpose coach, somatic therapist, and meditation teacher. Rick supports high-performing business owners, artists, investors, coaches, and change makers. After he exited his startup at age 25 that served over 200,000 members, he traveled the globe meeting and supporting some of the world's most influential thought leaders and spiritual teachers, who he featured on his hit YouTube series, Stories That Matter. Since a young age, Rick has been interested in consciousness, personal development, and spiritual growth. Today, Rick helps support many heart-led high performers master their internal state so that they can create real freedom in their life, relationships, and business. Rick's passion is bringing together the best of Eastern Western psychology alongside shamanic practices to support the collective heart awakening that is underway. Rick uses a multi-modality approach combining the latest in human behavioral psychology, spiritual wisdom, and innovative life and business strategies to help his clients achieve lasting fulfillment in their life, relationships, and business. In today's episode, we talk about attachment theory, which was incredibly interesting for me as a mother of a young child, and the many different layers that inform a healing journey when it comes to internalized beliefs surrounding safety and security. We also talk a lot about the importance of integration, which is a hot topic for us on the podcast this season, and Rick's own journey with plant medicine, as well as the evolution of his coaching work into his current offerings. It's a great episode, and we hope you enjoy. As always, thanks for tuning in, family.
A quick word from our sponsors before we begin this episode.
This episode is brought to you by Magic Fund Amazon. Four Visions Market is proud to be in partnership with Magic Fund, a nonprofit organization that works as a movement for Amazonian growth and indigenous cultures. Magic Fund focuses primarily in the Putumayo region of the Colombian Amazon, spearheading various initiatives that focus on the preservation of indigenous culture, land, and the health of the traditional peoples that live there. Magic Fund recently launched a new campaign that is called Planting Magic. Through this initiative, we are currently fundraising to be able to steward 50 hectares of land in the Colombian Amazon in order to plant and reforest the land with native endangered medicinal plant species. We believe that these sacred plants, if conserved and protected, can bring forth healing for all of humanity in the generations to come. Like many places in the world, the Amazon is under constant threat of encroachment. 17% of the Amazon rainforest has been lost in the last 50 years. An increased interest in the healing benefits of these plants threatens their survival. As these ancestral plants continue to come out of the jungle to be shared with the West, the dire need to plant and replant these medicines becomes more and more apparent. So we invite you to join us in planting magic and leaving a legacy for the future generations so that these medicines continue to accompany humanity for many years to come. Visit Magic Fund Amazon to learn more and to join the movement. Welcome, Rick. It's great to see you, and I'm so excited to have you on the show. So thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mariah. It's great to see you again. It's been a little minute since we've caught up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful the way timelines weave and our paths have been, evolving, and to be able to come back together in this capacity for today's conversation. It's really beautiful. So I'm really looking forward to touching base and dropping in with you.
Me too.
So let's begin with an introduction to who Rick William is for those of our listeners who may not be familiar with you and your work. Would love to just get a little introduction and download of who you are and a little bit about the path that you're walking.
Beautiful. So that's a great question. My main role today is a transformational coach, but I have a specific interest and specialize in trauma and the importance of that deep work that we do as we walk our path into greater levels of expansion and freedom. But yeah, I've studied with many different traditions, and including the plants, but have a deep interest in attachment and the nervous system, as well as the kind of Buddhist kind of contemplative technologies that we have access to as well. So many different things that I have an interest in, and I weave those together in a way that supports my clients, because a lot of these tools have been incredibly powerful in my own journey, and now I get to share them with my clients too.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's been so cool to just watch the evolution of your offerings and the way in which you're in service to your community. And you've had the opportunity to work with a lot of incredible people, a lot of influential people, and bringing these tools into the awareness of people who have a lot of impact. It's like such a blessing and such a beautiful offering and way to be in service. So it's really awesome. And, on that note, I would love to hear a little bit more about how you found your way to, the spiritual path, right? And that's really like all inclusive of all of these different avenues and aspects. But, were you raised in a spiritual environment, or tell us a little bit more about your journey that really ignited that spark within you?
That's a great question. I think it probably, like many of us, had always been there in some way, on my journey. I'd had glimpses of that growing up as a child, whether that be through dreaming or just like having certain experiences very young that were at that time kind of, there were unusual experiences through, dream space, and, through just having that childlike active imagination where we're connected to spirit, to plants, to animals, to intuition. So that was all active for me as a child, and that's woven its way back in as I've walked my path. Like some of those prior experiences make sense now, but I didn't grow up in a family where there was any spiritual connection, or that there was no kind of it was more kind of an atheistic household that I grew up in, but I was kind of having this experience of being a spiritual being, but no kind of framework or context that could live within, which caused immense pain. There was immense, pain within that, which is also beautiful, because that's what led my curiosity of like this, I sense there's more to discover here, but within the town and family system that I've grown up in, and I'm super grateful for them, but there wasn't that framework, and that sparked my curiosity to explore consciousness and explore my own development as a human being. And that led me down many different paths. I was probably experimenting, as most teenagers do, with cannabis and these types of things, and I had a mushroom experience when I was like 16 years old. I'm 35 now for context, and then my path kind of took me down we'll say a more challenging path, and got involved with the wrong crowd, which is easy to do as a teenager, and was then having experiences with life in a way that wasn't so good. There was cocaine and ketamine and ecstasy, and even smoking heroin at one point during my kind of teen years. And I really had a moment when I was about 19 where I was at a party and I lived with a death metal band. So if you can imagine living with a death metal band, that comes that comes with certain sort of experiences. And I'd lost my job at that point because I was just not showing up to life, and I was in a lot of pain, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So drugs at that time were a way for me to try and create the connection that was lacking in my life. And I didn't have the people or the processes or the tools to be able to process and digest my experiences, my trauma, and that was showing up at a behavioral level through my actions and work and with relationships. So age 19, I'm at a party, and I can't remember what I'd taken that night, but at one point someone gave me something, and it was LSD, but obviously I was under the influence of other narcotics at the time, and I didn't really know what I was taking, and I had a full-blown NDE. I had a near-death experience without the context of the setting to hold that experience, and know the consciousness at that point in my journey to be able to hold that level of experience. And it was a lot. I went through that and believed that I had died, and I was sad and watching the thread of my genes unravel, and I thought I was in hell, and that I'd made the wrong choices, and this was the end of my life, and had to kind of grieve that was my life. And I was 19 and I was dying. Obviously I didn't die, but experientially that's what it felt like. And I closed my eyes that night, accepting that was my life and how I'd showed up. And the next thing I know, I hear my alarm ringing. I open my eyes. The sun is beaming through the window. And I just felt so much gratitude to be alive. It was like, oh my God, I'm alive. And there was tears running down my eyes. I opened my bedroom door. There's people drunk on the floor, and I'm stepping over them, and I'm like, God is real. I was like, God is real. I was like, Jesus is real, and people were like, he's still high. But I wasn't. I in some senses that might have been, but I wasn't. I'd felt like this just inherent connection and gratitude to be alive again. And it really gave me the opportunity to okay, that isn't how I have to be. And that isn't how I want to die. I don't want to die like this. There's so much more to life, and started just getting myself back on the right track. And that led me to the next best decision I could make at the time. And that was to begin to get myself out of this disempowered place that I'd woven myself into, and to start to re-empower my life. And I used the gym and business to really be able to okay, I'm going to get my life back together. I'm going to create some discipline. I'm going to empower myself, and I'm going to begin to go out into the world and kind of get my life on track. And that's kind of led me to that for, maybe 4 or 5 years until again it hit another point where there was more evolution and to be had. But that's the kind of initial meat and potatoes of kind of my experience with growth and also the plants.
So beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love that. It's like the ultimate representation of this gift of life and this wake up call, right? Literally the alarm going off and getting to choose life again, and then choosing it really, it's like really taking that offering that you were given to be alive and to wake up and to go forth and execute and really move from that place of life is happening to me to life is happening for me, and I am going to empower myself and discover the life that is out there available for me to claim. So that's such a victory story, and really just makes me think of the divine alignment that each one of us inherently carry, that have chosen to walk the spiritual path, like all the different elements that come into place for you to have been given that LSD, or, you to have had that near-death experience, essentially, like, you're so blessed, and even those first 19 years of the separation and the illusion and having that spiritual thirst and looking to quench it and not having the outlets or the environment that was going to, nourish that. But then, that was the experience you were meant to have. And then life is always informing us. And, you were so guided and protected to that moment, and so beautiful. It's like, it's the ultimate victory. I love these victory stories that we get to hear on the people who are walking a spiritual path, because it really is. It's like pure victory and like receiving the inherent abundance of blessings that is available to all beings. So it's beautiful.
Beautifully put.
So tell me, like, what happened next, and how did your work with the spiritual part and element, spiritual studies, start to open up and through your journey, and how did you kind of go through that process of discovering what was for you, the tools that were, perhaps important at different stages, and then, eventually you outgrew them? If you could share a little bit more about, your journey into finding your authentic medicine.
Great question. So the first tool that I really found on the path was actually meditation. And I started meditating when I was about 21. So a couple of years after that experience, meditation started to come more onto the scene, and it was spoken about more online, the benefits of mindfulness. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm gonna try this. And I did, and I committed to it for a full year of practice. And that was really beautiful. And I hadn't at this point got any support. This was just me and my own self-study. And, one of the Buddha's first teachings is understanding, and I think this is a lifelong journey, is understanding the impact of cause and effect. That I began to see the effect to what would happen when I would begin to still the mind, that I would begin to, go inwards and actually begin to learn to feel and process and digest my experience. And that began to ripple out. I could begin to see the seeds of that show up in my life, that I could be more present to my experience and more compassionate towards myself and others. So that's been a huge tool on the path, and still to this day is a huge part of my practice. And it's evolved, considerably since just kind of using apps and actually really beginning to learn how that can work and be done in really skillful ways. And I have some incredible teachers, Dr. John Churchill and Dr. Dan, who have studied under the Indo-Tibetan tradition, and their initial teacher was the 33rd abbot, who was the meditation teacher of the Dalai Lama. So they were also attachment specialists. So I've been able to receive some beautiful, beautiful teachings through them in more recent times. But yeah, that was the first tool that came onto the scene for me was meditation. And that kind of led me up until I was maybe 24, 25. And I began to see that the bodybuilding and the business, that these were empowering experiences that I got to have. I got to re-empower my body. And I didn't get to move the trauma per se, but I was certainly utilizing that energy in a way that was more productive than the anger being directed inwards. It was a movement, not a complete movement, but it did support me in a type of empowerment that kind of regave me agency in the world, which is an important part of my development. And if we understand, and I think these are really useful maps to learn. So whether we look at, Ken Wilber's integral theory, or if we look at spiral dynamics or Erik Erikson's model of psychological development, I can track back all of these different pieces, that these are actually stages that, when done correctly, that a child would grow through in their first 13 to 18 years. And obviously it goes beyond that. But these were stages that I'd missed out, the feeling of safety and being seen and empowerment. Like, I didn't have that as a child because of the traumas and experiences I went through. So I had to re-go through that stage between the ages of 20 and 25 to kind of re-give myself that agency and autonomy in the world so that I could be an empowered being that would then further help me as I kind of continue to walk my path. So that led me to 25, and I had another kind of breakdown moment where I'm in a nightclub in Newcastle, Northeast England. And, at that point, because of my business and I was winning competitions as a competitive bodybuilder, all the bouncers and the security knew who I was. And, there was some beauty in that, but, not as well. So, I'd be able to like go up to the front of the door and just like shake the bouncer's hand and walk in and get a table and all of these things that Western culture deem as kind of success or status or these types of things. But inside, I really wasn't fulfilled. I was really like, oh, like, okay, I've created this business and I've created empowerment and cool. But inside, I still feel empty. I could feel there was a hollowness to my experience. And I'm sat there again, I'm looking around, I'm like, is this my life? Like, what am I doing here? It's like, it's kind of cool, I guess, but I could feel that I'd outgrown it. It was like a jacket that didn't fit anymore. So in that moment, I remember being 19, I was like, oh, well, I remember the psychedelics having like a really powerful impact on me. And I was like, maybe I revisit that and I re-delve back into that and see if I can get some deeper insight into what I'm not seeing here. And I did that. So I went and drank with ayahuasca. I'm 25, 26 roughly. Don't quote me on the dates, but it's around that time. And I went and sat with ayahuasca in Rotterdam, which is about an hour south of Holland. And I sat with a female shaman and got some profound insight into why this was showing up and where the kind of roots of this were coming from. And I got some very clear messaging of that it was time to let this aspect of myself go because I'd outgrown it. And there was a new chapter of my life that was ready for me, but it was going to require some bold moves again in order to move out of that, because it was very comfortable to be in that position. The job was very comfortable. My business was very comfortable. And, but at the same time, it was uncomfortable because it didn't fit anymore. Like it was a shoe that didn't fit or a jacket that didn't fit. And I'm sure many people listening have either had experiences like that, or maybe they're in an experience like that right now where something just doesn't quite fit. So I utilized the beautiful plant technologies in that moment and found a great, healer shaman at that time, and was able to see again. And from that insight, I took action again and, put my business up for sale, hired a CEO, and I followed the next best steps. I didn't have the whole path mapped out, but it was like, these are the next best steps. You need to go to the States. And I actually created an interview series at the time, kind of like a video podcast in a sense. And I went and got around to people that were living the type of life that I could sense had the pieces missing. Like I could sense intuitively that they had embodied certain stages of development that I had to grow into. And so I went and got around them so I could understand it through the kind of their mana or their beingness. And through that, I met new friends and new relationships and got insight into the different ways that people were living. And I started just implementing some of those. Cool. Like you guys have mentors or therapists or teachers. And I was cool. Like I'll go get a mentor, a coach and a therapist, and I'll start doing this too. And that's what began to unravel the journey from there to really to this point today.
So beautiful. I love it. And, everyone's journey to healing looks so different. And oftentimes the order of things is what changes, but ultimately there's so much universality in this recognition that how we've been operating, what we've been choosing in our lives is no longer working. And then, this search, this literal search for the answers or for that direction, that clarity that's going to start to unlock the keys and start to bring us more peace is so resonant and really beautiful through your own story. So thank you for sharing. So let's get a little bit more into the attachment theory and this concept of finding security within the self, because, you highlighted it a little bit in that last answer, and it's such an essential element to this healing journey. So I would love to start with you just sharing some of your own reflections, understandings of attachment, and essentially how that aspect is so elemental and informative in the self-awareness journey, and beginning to tap into our patterns and our reactivities and the choices that we make in all facets of life. Why don't we start there with just like a little overview, and then we can go a little deeper.
Great. So yeah, one of the things that I began to recognize pretty quickly was that at the root of my own suffering, or my own trauma, or my own dukkha, whatever we want to call it, was an unconscious, internalized lack of safety. And from that, I began to study many of the different psychological tools that we have in the West, while simultaneously having had a lot of experience with, whether it be the plants at this point, or whether it be, the Buddhist contemplative sciences, that I began to see a pattern emerging, whether it be IFS, or whether it be, attachment work specifically, or whether it be polyvagal theory in the nervous system, or inner child work, many of these things that we learn and see as we're walking the path. And I began to see that they were all pointing in the same direction. And I could really see and sense the importance of creating that internalized sense of safety and attunement. And you're a mother, Mariah, so I imagine you're well in touch with how receptive your child is to everything that's happening in the environment. We come into this world as little bundles of a nervous system, and we are co-regulating with everyone and everything in our environment. And I knew enough in my journey at this point that, some of those pieces were not there for me in my journey, whether my mom was overworking because my dad had left when I was 6 months old, and other experiences that had happened. So I could really see and sense that internally there was a lack of safety. So I began that work and that study, and it's been incredibly profound. It's I believe the foundation. And even if we look at the chakra system, it's the root. It's where it all begins. It's the connection to mother. It's the connection to ground. It's the connection to safety, and it's also the connection to earth. The mother with a capital M, and started really weaving and working a lot on that specifically. And then again, just as a study, because I'm a forever student, and I do things, and then I see the result that begins to have on my life. So does it work? Does it not? Maybe, I don't know. I'll try it. So I began to try some of these tools and healing modalities, and doing specific intentional work around that safety element, the mother element. And at this point, I'm like a probably 210-pound muscly guy who's really getting in touch with the feminine element, the safety and attunement, the warmth, the love, and began giving that to myself, and through coaching and therapy as well, and began to see that would ripple into my life. Like, things began to become a lot easier because I felt safer. I could share my voice. I could speak more clearly. I could be less reactive in situations because I could hold my own internal discomfort in a space of warmth and connectivity. And through many processes through that, really began to see the ripple effect of that. And yeah, it's a huge part of the foundation of my work. And I truly believe it's a foundation of the path, even for advanced practitioners. It's both the kind of the most rudimental, fundamental work, but it's also some of the deepest work you can even do as an advanced practitioner is working on that sense of safety and attunement, and then working all the way up to the kind of father elements that start coming in, because the father is also somewhat missing in the kind of attachment conversation a lot of the time. But the father is also that protective energy, the seeing, the clearly seeing, and protecting and holding space so that love and safety can be there and can emerge. So yeah, I did a lot of work there and get to support my clients through that work. And it's super deep and super profound. And the expansion, most importantly, that comes from that is huge, right? It seems like kind of like, you know, I know from my own experience, but I see this in the path too. It's like we want to experience like states of elevation, and they're beautiful. Like they can be profoundly impactful to experience the oneness and the connectivity to all beings, all things, the we feel yes, yes, yes to that. And when we come back into our daily life, into our relationships, you know, being able to show up and hold the ground and have that like grounded safety and attunement is actually what begins to show up in our lives, so that we can actually turn the states that we experience into states, and they can have us move through the already mapped stages of development of a human being. Like those stages of development, you know, at this point in time, through the work of Piaget, through the work of Erik Erikson, through the work of Ken Wilber and integral theory and spiral dynamics, those stages have been pretty well mapped. And we can begin to see and identify where there are places where we might be able to direct more intention so that we can continue growing into refuge beings, so that we can continue growing into, you know, elders and space holders and transitional characters or bodhisattvas, like whatever we want to call it, that are actually here to make profound impact and change. But obviously the impact and change starts right here. It's how I show up to my friends and my team and my partner and the people that I interact with on a daily basis. And then that begins to ripple out, as you know.
So beautiful and resonant. And I love that this is one of the topics that you felt called to share about, because it's so true when you say like it's multifaceted and it comes in many different layers. And it's like this, one of these foundational principles that continue evolving in the spiritual studies and the spiritual journey. I know for me personally, focusing on this security through the physical was one of the first ways that I started to, you know, find my security. And then, you know, later on in my journey, and then now through being a mother, so many new layers are unfolding in this relationship with secure attachment. And now that I'm in this role of holding that for another being, it's like so much has opened and downloaded for me in this process. And you know, I feel like it's such a beautiful topic because it does like find its way into every crevice of our lives, through our relationships, through the way that we show up in the world, through our relationship with self. And like I mentioned, it was very much physical manifestation of this security first. And then, you know, that only gets us to a certain level of feeling secure, right? And then being able to rest into the divine mother, feminine, and masculine archetypes, and realizing this concept of being held is like this deeper element of the security that a lot of us can't access at first. And we're really just like focusing on the logistical elements that are going to help us, you know, feel like we're held, right? And then that gets to a point where it's like, that's not cutting it. And then we go deeper, and we go to connect deeper with the earth, and we go to connect deeper with the force of nature and the universe. And we start to allow, and this element of really allowing and being held and being supported has been one of the most pivotal elements to my own spiritual studies, and has unlocked so much for me on a personal level as well as in my service, when I realized I don't have to do it alone. And so I feel like these concepts of unburdening ourselves and giving ourselves over to something greater, and trust, faith, allowing ourselves to be supported by all of creation, it goes hand in hand with attachment theory in many ways, you know? And so it's like, I love how this topic really does have these multifaceted layers and a consistent deepening. And there's so much there.
Beautiful share, and what a gift! What a gift that you get to give that to your little boy, that he gets to come into this world with a mother who is aware and attuned and has internalized a sense of deep safety, and he, without knowing, just gets that gift. What like how incredible and beautiful that is unfolded in your path, and you get to give that gift.
Yes, thank you. It's just tremendous blessing. And it's actually something I've been observing in him more and more now. He's 2.5, so he's at that point where like a secure attachment bond is really starting to be revealed in his independence, his desire to go out and do things without me, or, you know, be curious. And it's so beautiful to watch how he'll go and do it and like be super independent. And then he'll come back and check in. But it's because he has that safety and he has that foundational trust and feeling of being held that he's able to go and expand and go investigate. And then, you know, this other element, which has been very interesting, I'll just share really quickly because I think you'll find it interesting, especially like raising a little boy with having so much awareness of this bond, is that I've noticed that I've given him so much healthy attachment and security that we're now at this phase where I'm still breastfeeding him. He's 2.5, and I'm actually feeling this call to start to shift some of the dynamics, that if I was to like coddle him or continue in the way that we have, that actually would not be supportive to him. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that or opinions, but it's something I've been observing within him, and we're at this really beautiful transition in our relationship.
That's really beautiful. And attunement is what is the word that springs to mind as you're sharing that. And this is why it's not a one size fits all. Like the beauty of those kind of fundamental stages of development through internalizing secure attachment. The first piece is safety, which is the first chakra. The second piece is attunement, because just giving love and safety isn't always necessarily the greatest thing for any individual. And you'll know this from being in ceremony space, right? It's like there is a time and a place to be the loving support. And then there's also the time, the attunement piece of actually intentionally pulling back to allow the own empowerment of the individual, whether it be that your child, your friend, your partner, someone in ceremony or a therapeutic space, is actually the attunement piece. When that's online, you just know, it's that internal knowing of like, now is the time that something different is needed. And that's attunement. And that skill can also be harnessed and strengthened as we begin to more deeply attune to ourselves. Sometimes, you know, the next stage is actually to begin to take action. It's not always just to kind of coddle ourselves and to love ourselves. Sometimes the most loving thing to do is to go take the bold exploratory action towards the new thing. And then as things arise, as we move through that, we might then return back to safety a little bit to nourish ourselves. And then we continue to take a step forward. So just celebrating you in your own knowing, because of your own internalized safety and your own intelligence to attune to what's necessary for you and your son. Beautiful.
Thank you. And I love that so much, this concept of attunement, because in all of our relationships, they need different things in different stages, right? And to really be able to be in that loving, healthy dynamic with whoever it is, and to recognize that there are moments when that safety and holding is so vital and necessary. And then, yes, there are certain moments when we have to really allow. And I love that you mentioned ceremony, because it's so true, and when you're supporting in ceremony, there are moments when someone really does need that extra support of another presence there to anchor and hold them through that process. And then there are certain moments when people are having very cathartic experiences, but it's so clear that what they're releasing, they need to do it on their own. And so that's the divine balance, right, of this whole concept. And it's really beautiful and multi-layered of learning. To me, it's a true element of like shamanic relating to life, is when we can learn when we need to be there in that capacity, and then when we need to hold a different capacity, and to be able to flow between the two from a place of grace and attunement, like you said.
And I think this, speaking to the shamanic piece, which we kind of eradicated in the West, not that we were eradicated, not that we didn't have our own shamanic practices in Western culture, but they were certainly eradicated by, empire and culture at the time. But I do think that, the shamanic traditions, and they're really good at that. And I think the benefit that maybe solely the kind of Western psychological approach and, say, attachment theory misses from an experiential point of view is that the shamanic route gives us the ability to have trust and safety in something greater than ourselves, not conceptually, but experientially. And because you've likely had so many of those experiences by now where you're trusting in capital M, Mother, capital D, divine, like you've had so many experiences of that my assumption is that not only have you internalized a sense of safety within yourself, there's also that connection to the transpersonal that has safety and trust built into it, that it allows us to be able to step back from our own sense of safety and trust. And, okay, this is like the interweaving of God, the divine, the universe has this, like this person has this. There's a greater weaving going on here, and I'm not needed in this moment. But when I am needed, then I can return, because there's like deeper trust and safety kind of within the field itself, which I think is really powerful, that the shamanic path and the plant medicine paths can also have us connect with, experience, and thus embody.
I love that. This week, for our giveaway, we are gifting a bottle of Mapona Honey eye drops. For centuries, the indigenous people of Central America have used Mapona honey for eye health and to treat issues of the eyes, such as cataracts and conjunctivitis. This special honey is powerful but soothing, making it a wonderful alternative for those who do not like the sting of sananga but are drawn to working on the healing of their eyes. This honey contains antimicrobial and antibiotic properties, which allow it to penetrate deeply into the eye, purifying the pupils and healing any ailments limiting a user's clarity of vision. Side note, I worked with the Mapona eye drops last week and had the most beautiful healing reset for my nervous system. The Mapona medicine is so incredibly nourishing and healing. And now for this week's giveaway winner. Our winner this week is C. Gibbs 1214, who writes, "It is so amazing to have not only an online shop, but also a podcast to explore and experience the wisdom of the plants shared by heart-centered practitioners so willing to give their time and knowledge. I look forward to hearing more." Thank you so much for your kind words, C. Gibbs 1214, and we are so happy to hear that you have been enjoying the podcast. You just won a bottle of our Mapona Honey eye drops. Please email us at thepodcast@fourvisionsmarket.com to coordinate the delivery of your package. To enter our ongoing raffle, all you need to do is write an honest review of our podcast, either on iTunes or YouTube. Sorry, Spotify, Google Podcast users. Spotify, Google Podcasts do not allow written reviews, so you will have to temporarily jump onto iTunes or YouTube to leave your written review. But that's it. Each week, we'll announce a new winner, read their honest review on the show, and give away some awesome products. Now back to today's episode. So, Rick, you made this pilgrimage when you left your lands and you started first in the States and searching and looking for, what that next phase would look like for you. And when you first reached out to me, it was in COVID. You were in Mexico and you wanted to come work with the Taitas. And this was before we ever met in person, but that's the first remembrance I have of like you reaching out and feeling the call to the Yahi. And since then, you have, gone through this whole path of choosing and integrating within the culture, the traditions, beginning to study more. And I would love to hear a little bit more about how your journey with the Yahi has been, since we haven't really gotten a chance to talk that much. And also just like hearing, what drew you to the Yahi, what's resonant and present for you in this journey that you're in currently as you're now beginning to bridge your coaching with the work with the Yahi, with the work with plant medicine, and whatever you feel called to share there.
Yeah, the Yahi has been, and the whole family, like this tradition has been such a pivotal part in my healing and spiritual journey. And there is so much that I have learned from the Yahi, from the Taitas, and also from the community in ways that it's like, when people talk about like ayahuasca and the medicines coming out to the West, which I think is needed, my part of that conversation is, well, like, yes, awesome. And a lot of the healings that I actually received were in the interconnectedness and the things that I was seeing in the embodiment of the people who were holding space and relating in ceremony. So it's not like it's just the Yahi that I was learning from. It's also the individuals, the Taitas, the space holders that are weaving within that container that was also a part of my study. And I was learning through that whole journey. And it's been super profound and deep and challenging and beautiful. And I've went and drank with other traditions. I've cheated on you guys a couple of times. I'm joking, but I've came back and I have the main thing that I feel from it is I intuitively sense pretty much straight away, because of my understandings of somatic experiencing, that there was a really deep element that felt like it was also very physically healing, that the Yahi that was able to access for me more than a maybe traditional ayahuasca brew. And there was something within that. It was just a natural resonance and also that understanding of, this is like really helping the body also heal. And I know the importance of that. So that's what drew me. And also the fact that it's both healing and it's also a celebration. Like I really love the fact that it has both components, that it starts in the evening and we go all night until the sun rises, and there's incredible musicians that are playing that are also a part of the weaving. And that for me would like summed it up, because like, yes, like let's heal, but also like let's dance and celebrate and appreciate the wonder and beauty that it is to live and be human and connected to one another and to nature, that I'd not experienced in the same way with other traditions. And I just so deeply appreciate that, because getting the kind of celebratory vibes into my system was also healing. Because, if I'm just kind of like down there in the weeds healing the trauma, but I don't get to like have the expansion into the healing, for me, that felt incomplete. And what I really appreciate in this tradition is that it has both components. And there's also an openness and a willingness in the family to experiment and to adapt and to make changes and to listen to feedback, and that it is a tradition, but that it's also an evolving tradition that is bringing in, different ideas and insights and, more women into the space, and these things that I feel personally are necessary when dealing with a different type of psychology, my own included, that haven't grown up in the jungle, that haven't grown up in the Andes or the Amazon or Peru or so on and so forth. So I got like an intuitive sense, like this is what's being built here is really great. And, I feel really blessed to be a part of that, and even more blessed that I've made friends now in the family, and we got to just create this, incredibly intentional container where we took 18 people for 8 weeks. Like, you couldn't come drink medicine if you weren't a part of the container. And we went through, bringing in all of the kind of Western psychology and Eastern contemplative practices, and then weaving that in with the shamanic tradition, and having all three of those different elements and aspects of the journey co-weave together for a whole group of people, so that when they arrive in ceremony, they already know how to be with the discomfort, the trauma, the dukkha, and to bring that back into connection. Because as we know, when we go drink medicine, it's like gasoline. You tip the gasoline on and like, poof, it's all right there. So to give people those skills so that they could feel safer, we've been talking a lot about safety and trust, and that we could do that in a container with, safe, trusting relationships, so that when we arrive as a group, there's already connection, there's already safety. We already know who one another is. We already know who the Taita is. We already know who Eli is. And we already know who the team is, so that when we're arriving, it's not all of these unknown faces, that it's actually, no, this is my community who I've been growing with. So that now I show up and I can go deeper, and I can really show up to the blessing that it is to get to drink these medicines that the Taitas are bringing us from the tradition and also the jungle. So that's been super beautiful. And also just to be a part of that, to be a part of that weaving was so beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. I love that response and all the different layers to the celebration element, to, really the Yahi invites us to value life and to celebrate this gift of being alive. And then the other element of the psychology of the Western mind and the evolving tradition. I'm so happy that you touched upon that point, because it's been such a journey, within this culture and this tradition, this community and family of over the last 12, 13 years, bringing the Yahe out of the jungle and then learning. We're all in this period of study and learning, the Taitas included, of what it means to bring the medicine out of the jungle and what are the implications. And then, when Taita started working with Westerners, he went through a profound spiritual study of understanding psyche, because he had never worked with Western patients before. And so the way that the Taitas are in service within their community, it is just different than how it is working with people who are coming from all walks of life, from all ends of the earth, and coming to receive healing and counseling from a medicine man. And so he had to go through his own personal study, which he's still very much in. And something that I love about Taita Juanito is, like, he loves the study of the human psyche. That's literally what drives him. And so he loves to see other illnesses that he's never treated before. He loves to really understand, like, the different challenges that the Western mind has, that the indigenous mind just doesn't have, from people who are living deep in the rainforest versus people who are living in our society. It is different. And that first recognition was one of the pivotal points when we realize, okay, the design has to change. The design has to evolve so that we can meet this calling and this, divine guidance of the medicine coming out and being shared. In order to do that, it has to change and evolve. And it's been in so many different ways, right? And it's also one of the things that keeps me within the culture of Yahe and with my teachers, because there is that openness and willingness to meet evolution and growth, and that things don't have to stay the same. And to have a 5,000-year-old tradition with leaders and wisdom keepers who are willing to do that, and not so attached to the preservation of what was, but willing to carry through the wisdom of their ancestors and meet this new time. It's so beautiful, and really like exemplifies what we're needing as humanity in this time of rapid growth and evolution, and this time of media and all of the information that's now available and accessible to us, in the ways that we're connected in this way in society. So that is definitely deeply resonant for me, because it's definitely one of the things that has kept me here and kept me asking questions, and it is this process of like, okay, so if we do it this way, what is that going to mean? And how do we need to change maybe how we're doing it in order to meet the person who's, for example, flown halfway around the world to come work with you, and then they get their moon and they don't get to work with you because they're within the tradition, we don't serve Yahi to women on their moon. What do we do there, right? That's a completely new evolution that the traditional communities just didn't have to deal with. And then the other element that's really big, which I'd love to kind of segue into here a little bit more, especially as you're talking about your containers that you're beginning to cultivate within the context of the Yahi retreats, is this concept of integration. Because it's something that, again, the traditional indigenous communities didn't need integration. Their life was fully integrated within the context of their traditional ways. And so the Yahi ceremonies, the traditional Maloka, was within their territories, and they would commune regularly with their sacraments and with the plants, and then go back to their little houses, their individual homes within the village. And so there was no need for integration, because their life was integrated, right? Their way of being was fully in union and aligned with the plants and with the cycles of the earth. And so for us who are now coming into these healing traditions from completely different backgrounds and completely different cultures, there is this process of recalibration that, I've experienced it firsthand. I've witnessed it. It can be very abrasive. It can be very intense. It can be shocking, right? To go from that place of such divine communion back into the reality of the current state of society and human consciousness. And so this process of how we integrate from an experience like that, how we take the gems and the seeds, is so crucial that we find the tools, the processes, the practices, and the containers to be able to facilitate this work in a good way. And if we don't do it, if we weren't exploring this concept as, the plant medicine community as a whole, as our unique Yahi niche and community of people, then we would be, doing a great disservice to the ancestral traditions and to all beings that are wanting this healing. So I'm sure that you have a lot to say about this, and a lot of great insights. I would also love to hear more about specific elements that you found being, pivotal in your own integration process, and just from what you've observed working with clients. Let's get into this topic a little bit and share whatever's on your heart.
Yeah, as you said, it's such an important topic and study. And that's what I really appreciate. I just want to second that I really appreciate that this tradition and the Taitas have that openness to learn and to grow and evolve. It's essential. I think it's so essential, and it's such a beautiful quality that then gets to be woven in through all of us, because then we can kind of keep that openness alive as we begin to weave these technologies together. And that's really how I like to see them. It's like all of whether it be the Western psychological approach that has great benefits, it also has flaws. Whether we look at Eastern contemplative sciences and practices, Buddhism, etc., amazing technology, it also has its flaws. The same with the shamanic route. Amazing tools, amazing practices, also has its flaws. What interests me most in this time and this moment and in my life is actually the emergence of the technologies in a way that supports the healing and growth of ourselves at an individual level, but also as communities and then at scale, because the problems that we deal with today are not the problems we even dealt with a decade ago, never mind 100, 200, 500, 1,000 years ago, which is where a lot of these traditions come from. So it would be unwise of us, and I'm sure if we went and spoke to any of the great sages and saints, they would be like, yeah, like take what works, integrate it, and find new ways to work with these tools, because I have no doubt that they would say that's what we've been doing. You know, a lot of the practices, even the Buddha was known to have studied the Hermetic principles that come from, Egypt and Göbekli Tepe. So like, early civilizations, which then come from the Atlanteans. So these technologies aren't necessarily new, but they keep being rewoven through different turns of the wheel of Dharma. And now we're in a new turning. And what excites me most is the new weavings of these technologies. And the reason that I'm here and love the family so much is because there's an openness to be a part of that emergent technology and be a part of the emergent beings that are weaving these together in a more effective way to deal with the challenges that we face as people and on this planet with, nature and earth and everything that's emerging. So just want to kind of second and like underscore like how cool and beautiful and important that is. And then that leads me into, my own journey with that and, getting to give my clients the tools from these different spaces and these different technologies that will be the most supportive in their lives as individuals, as they're growing and serving and showing up in the world. And that also preps them for the ceremony itself so that it has a practical application. And, being through that journey myself and feeling like I didn't quite get the support that I needed and that so on and so forth, instead of complaining about it, I was like, well, I'm just going to create it. And I sensed that if I was like, well, this is optional, I know human beings enough to know if there's a way out of doing something that's a little uncomfortable or challenging. I'm human too, so I have the tendency to take that. So I'm like, no, like you can't come drink unless this is a part of it. So I made it compulsory that this was a part of it and had an application process to make sure that the right individuals were coming together. Because as you said, that you noted in your study, is that these medicines were drank in a way where the community and the integration was already built in. Now, what's necessary as we bring these changes and transformations, which can be jarring as you go back to a community of people who maybe don't have shared experience and who aren't walking the path and who aren't in their fulfillment and their expression, is that that's like a garden. And if we replant our tree and we put seeds and intention and love and connection and we get around loads of other people who are doing the same thing, it becomes a lot easier for our garden to grow and for our fruit to fruit. But then when we go put the tree back in the old garden, it can become it's painful. And I'd put my tree back in the old garden so many times. I'm like, that's like hard and is unnecessarily hard. And then I had to work through all those pieces, piece by piece by piece, to make sure that I had the supportive community, to make sure I had the support that I needed. And I would have to go outsource and resource these all individually and kind of hodgepodge them together in a way, whilst learning all these different things all over the place to kind of like hodgepodge something that would work more effectively and skillfully. And I was like, well, I'm just going to take all of that I have an understanding of like the necessary component of supportive community that is values aligned, that is also walking the path and are empowered sovereign individuals, but humble students. And that we weave in the technologies of attachment and polyvagal theory in the nervous system so that you're not dependent on the tool of the Yahi. Like it gets to be another powerful pillar in your spiritual tool belt and the spiritual academy that you can then lean on when necessary, but you're not going to need to go to a ceremony every weekend unless that's like a deep part of your path, which is aligned for some people, not for others. but that this gets to be a choice. And if you can choose, well, actually, like I have the skills and resources and sovereignty to work through this, then maybe I don't need that ceremony and I can space them out a little bit more. It's something I do once every 3, 6, 12 months, 24 months, whatever is most resonant for each individual. But that we give all of the tools necessary so that it becomes a choice, that the medicine becomes something you're choosing, that, this is the best tool to apply to this specific thing I'm working with versus the default tool because there's no other tools in the tool belt. So really giving people all of the tools from the West, from the East, and then weaving that specifically in a way that makes sense with this tradition. And that's been the weaving, and then seeing that whole community come together. And like I was just looking, we're a few days out of ceremony now with the WhatsApp group, and getting to be with those people, that community, which they really built such a solid family, and there was so much wisdom within that. And they're out now, and they went for a meal together last night, and they're already beginning to create their own sense of aligned community and family that can support one another as they step into this next evolution of their lives, and that they have some more, co-regulation and aligned support as they go out into the world, so they're no longer alone. And in this last half of the integration, which is the next 4 weeks, it's actually setting them up in a way where this doesn't necessarily end with the call that I end on 4 weeks time from now, but this can be something that you guys as leaders step into your own positions and then take this community as something that is something you get to grow with, because that's what's necessary. If we're to really create large scale impact and change, it's not just one individual waking up that's necessary. It's all beings waking up that's necessary. Like that's what will create this next shift. And there's a belief field within that, right? Like if we all see each other as awakened, awakening beings, sovereign and humble as we walk the path, and we're holding that for one another, it becomes a lot easier to step into that. Just like, if you go back to an old friend and they see you as you were when you were 15, you kind of feel that disconjunction in the field, like you're no longer seeing me. You're kind of pasting onto me an identity that was once there that I've integrated, but now we're kind of not in full connection. And you're kind of drawing me back into that older way of being, versus having the people in your life that see you as you are now and want to support that continued evolution, makes the moving through the stages and states of development a lot more supportive. Just like your son, right? If you keep seeing him as a toddler, he's never going to grow up, and you're going to see him as a baby, he's not going to grow into a toddler. And if you keep seeing him as a toddler, he's not going to grow up into a young boy and teenager and adult. It's a constant updating of the new evolution that someone's in, and the seeing part of it is actually really important, because that gives us the reflection from outside. Even though we might internalize it, awesome, but to have that support from the outside to see you as you are now and supporting that evolution makes the journey a lot easier. And I think that's really important.
So good. I love all of that. And it's so beautiful what you have been doing with like the culmination of your own healing journey, all the different facets and the tools, and then now getting to share it and be in service to others and really step into that authentic offering. And so thank you for all those insights. And yeah, it's definitely like this concept of integration and this concept of integration of life, right? Just like put plant medicine aside, but like really stepping into this constant growing and this constant updating, like you said, of what it means to be human and meeting life in all of its different components, facets, expressions, and really being along for the ride and willing to meet life in its totality. So that's really what we're doing, and that's what people are able to do through a program like yours that you are developing. And I know you have another cohort coming up starting in January. So, for anyone who's looking for like a really holistic, held process with plant medicine, working with Rick would be like an incredible gift. And then getting to come down and meet the Taitas and come work with the plant medicine in that context, go home, receive the community, the support, and the toolbox, like you mentioned, like these tools to really be successful. I can't endorse an experience like that enough, honestly, because that's really so so ideal on so many levels for anyone who's looking to experience plant medicine for the first time, or anyone who's really looking to make the most out of an encounter with plant medicine, And I think that really is what it comes down to. It's like going down, leaving your home, going to a ceremony or a retreat and making that investment in commitment. Like, you want it to work, right? You want it to be sustaining. You want it to really, bring you what you're looking for. And so to really recognize that it requires so many things besides just going and drinking that cup and going to the ceremony, and to give like acknowledgement to the extent and the fullness of the healing process, of the spiritual journey, spiritual studies. If there's anything else that you want to share about your program or your upcoming cohort, would be a perfect time, Rick.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Yeah, the next cohort we're doing will be starting in January. And it is probably at this time, it's not fully mapped out yet. It's at least going to be 8 weeks prior, and then probably 4 weeks in the back end. We've learned some things this time. So like me and Mariah are sharing, that it's a study too. So there's things that we've been able to, that have worked really well, that we're going to keep. And there's new things that we're going to add in. So this will also be a completely different cohort in many ways. And the individuals that come together will also make it so. So that process and application is now open. We will be limited to a certain number of spots to keep the container tight and connected. And as it's an intentional community, there's an application process for that. And that's not to exclude anyone per se, but it's to ensure that the right group of like-hearted, like values individuals are coming together, so that we can really create pods of people that have that alignment, so that deeper friendships and connection and community and opportunities can also come from the container itself. Because people who come out and walk this path, like, there's already like your life's with an S on the end, journeys that you've been through. The fact that you're going out to drink medicine already says a lot about where you are in your journey. And, to get to meet other individuals that come from all walks of life, that have so much wisdom, and so much healing can come through just that in itself. And if that's of interest to you, you can go to my website, which is rickwilliam.com. On the top bar, if you're on your desktop, it'll say Costa Rica retreat. If you're on you have I think it's called the hamburger, the 3 lines. You can click on that and you'll see Costa Rica retreat. You'll see all the information on there, the videos. It'll give you a breakdown of the kind of modules and things we'll be going through. And then at the bottom of the page is an application. You can even put that in now, even though we won't be starting until January. And, that will be read, and then we'll get back to you within 24, 48 hours from there. And just thank you to everyone who's listening. If you've made it this far with us in the journey, also sending you guys so much love. And thank you to you, Mariah, for hosting this and being a constant pillar, both in the community and the community at large, to walk this path. And, you asked such beautiful, thoughtful questions today. You made my job as a guest super, super easy. So super grateful to you and everything that you're doing. And many blessings to you and your little one, your family too. Been great to reconnect today.
From everyone at the Four Visions Market family, we would like to thank you for listening to our podcast. We really hope that you've enjoyed the conversation and gained many new insights on plant medicines, ancestral wisdom, and much more. Please remember to visit our website at www.fourvisionsmarket.com for more resources and information on plant medicine and spiritual tools. And please don't forget to follow us across social media for regular updates on upcoming episodes. We are grateful for your support and look forward to continuing this path with you all. Until next time, take care, stay present, and stay connected.